So welcome everybody to this Friday session. We'll be looking at chapter 11 a little bit more. And before we get into that, our newest brainstorm as a school. You ready for this one? This actually comes from Bob Rye. If any of you guys know Bob, he's a member of David Delaplane's Friday group. And Bob's been listening to Ken Wapnick's seminar on the psychotherapy pamphlet, which I forget the order now. I can't remember whether the psychotherapy pamphlet was written first or before the Song of Prayer. Does anybody know that one? Or after the Song of Prayer? Anyway, they were written within about a year or so after each other, after the course was published, because the Song of Prayer was really about bringing course students back to what forgiveness was all about and where it was at, forgiveness in the mind, and getting away from the body level, getting away from the worldly level. Do not put forgiveness in an earthly frame. And the same thing happened with the psychotherapy pamphlet. It wanted to get course students back on track to what healing was about. So psychotherapy, it sounds like it's a therapist, patient kind of thing. Well, psychotherapy, the way he breaks it down right in the introduction, is all about healing. Therapy is about healing. And then psycho part is the mind. Not that you're psycho, even though we all are psycho, walking crazies. But the gist of it is, it's the healing of the mind, the psychotherapy pamphlet. So he was trying to get students back on track. And Bob was pointing out how helpful Ken's seminar on the psychotherapy pamphlet, where Ken takes it line by line and goes through it. So on Fridays, in our miracle hour, we're going to try to do that. We're going to play about 20, 25 minutes of Ken, and then we'll step back and turn the recording off and then talk about it, what it means. Especially healing in terms of, everything we're dealing with now, all the crazy stuff with the pandemic and do this, don't do that, et cetera, et cetera. But focusing on what really real healing is and where it is and how to do that. And so on Fridays at 5 p.m., that'll be the focus every Friday on the psychotherapy pamphlet, and specifically Ken's comments on it. All that'll be up on the website. If you don't have the psychotherapy pamphlet, in the newer editions of the course, it's actually included in there under supplements down here at the bottom. You can buy it in this version online, foundationforcourseofmiracles.org. I think this one's $6. Back in the old days, Nidra has a copy of this one. This one's a hard to find one. And actually, 1996, it was last published, and it combines Song of Prayer and psychotherapy pamphlet. And then finally, my old-fashioned version that I totally beat up is this one. But if you're going to come to Friday class, you probably want to have a psychotherapy pamphlet somewhere, somehow. And you can easily order them from the Foundation for A Course in Miracles if you just want to buy one individually. Or like I say, if you already have it in a newer edition. So any questions specifically about that? Any info that I'm leaving out? Yeah, Judy?
Tim, will we know ahead of time?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm turned down for some reason. Go ahead, try to speak again.
Will we know ahead of time what sections we're going to do?
Yeah, my volume is not working.
Oh dear.
It came back. I hear you now. Try again.
Will we know ahead of time what sections we're going to do so we can look at it beforehand?
Well, we'll start at the beginning. We'll work it.
Okay.
We'll work consecutively through it, and yeah, as we go, when I send out that Friday post, hopefully I'll have it in there where we will be at.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, so we'll start next Friday, June 5th. See how it goes. I'm not sure how the recording is going to look or sound like replaying it back over the computer and then you're watching it. We'll see. We'll see. So gifts of the fatherhood. We're in section 1 in chapter 11. I think we made it to about paragraph 4 or 5 the other day. And right now I want to review a little bit on paragraph 1, page 194 in the text, chapter 11, section 1. Chapter 11, section 1, the gifts of the fatherhood. Fatherhood. It's an interesting word. Father, not just the gifts of the father, but fatherhood. And he only uses it a few times in the course compared to about the 800 times he uses the word father. Fatherhood. And really, there's one gift of the father, and it's himself, which is what he says in paragraph 7. We'll get to that. In that first paragraph, however, you have learned your need of healing. I mean, he's talking to Helen, he's talking to us, that by now you probably realize there's something a little bit sick about the way you perceive things. And maybe you're beginning to wake up and realize that there's a need for healing. I found out the other day I can eliminate myself so I don't have to watch myself talk there. There's a hide self view if you don't want to watch yourself when you're looking at people on screen. It's in the 3 little dots in the corner of your, I think it's on there. Yeah. And if it's not, you might have to update your Zoom with a recent update in order to have it. I don't know when it showed up on my computer, but I started using it, and it's nice not to have to look at me while I'm trying to move. So you have learned your need of healing. I've learned my need not to look at myself and take myself so seriously on the screen. Would you bring anything else to the sonship, recognizing your own need of healing for yourself? Meaning, this is not a course about healing anybody else. It's about healing my perception of who I am, who we are. So this is a course about healing that perception, my own need of healing for myself. For in this, recognizing my need for healing, and this is interesting because he says this a number of times, in this recognition that I'm the one that needs healing, the foundation on which God will help build again the thought system begins to take shape. For in this lies the beginning of the return to knowledge, the foundation on which God will help build again the thought system you share with him. So it's in this waking up and recognizing I need help. I need healing. I'm the one that needs to have my own perception changed, and that lays the foundation for having everything change, my perception of everything. And then talking about building this new thought system, this new dwelling place, not one stone you place upon it will be but blessed by him, for you will be restoring the holy dwelling of his son, where God wills his son to be and where he is already. So in whatever part of the mind of God's son, you restore this reality. Whatever part of the sonship, whoever I'm dealing with in any given moment, whoever I look at and am willing to see a different way, they become another brick in this new thought system, in this new dwelling place, in this new foundation that we're building. So pick any brother in any given moment, and it doesn't even have to be in front of you. If he's just in your mind's eye, if you just think of him from the past, from the future, from something that happened today, if you're willing to see that brother the way Jesus does, that's where the healing is. That's where we're going with all this. In whatever part of the mind, in whichever brother you think of, you restore this reality. The big payoff is you restore it to yourself. How I see my brother is always how I see myself. You dwell in the mind of God with your brother. You can't leave him out. For God himself did not will to be alone. Didn't will for God to be alone, didn't will for us to be alone without our brother. So a lot of emphasis in that paragraph, obviously, about this new foundation that he's building, and how our brother is absolutely necessary to do that. And so as an opening meditation, I wanted to back up to paragraph 4 at the top. I don't know why that one keeps calling me, but he, you know, it's Jesus's role in this whole process, that he's going to help walk us through it. He's going to be the lamp that lights the way for our getting there. So Lynn, you want to read paragraph 4 at the top of page 194, and we'll get quiet for a little bit.
My brother, hear, hear, you are part of God and part of me. When you have at last looked at the ego's foundation without shrinking, you will also have looked upon ours. I come to you from our Father to offer you everything again. Do not refuse it in order to keep a dark cornerstone hidden, for its protection will not save you. I give you the lamp, and I will go with you. You will not take this journey alone. I will lead you to your true Father, who hath need of you as I have. Will you not answer the call of love with joy?
And we'll get quiet for a little bit. And gently come back. Anything about that, Lynn?
I feel that we can only give our own meaning to that, where that kind of a question, that kind of an invitation, that kind of a promise, that kind of offer almost, you know, it's we each answer that. However we hear it, we give the meaning to it for us. You know, our right mind, Holy Spirit, hears that for us. And our wrong mind would certainly find all different ways to not listen, not hear, and definitely not answer the question. And everyone will eventually make it home. So while this isn't a rush, why waste time? Why prolong suffering? Why linger? Why stay in hell when we could step out of it? And I had this vision as we were reading and speaking, and that I puzzled over this earlier. The statement, God gave you his fatherhood and he gave you himself. What, those are questions, we have to ask. We can read the words, but then it's like, what is the meaning of that? What does that mean? He has given me fatherhood. And then later he says the sonship, he's given you the sonship. He's given you, and it's in you, and he's given you his love, and he's given you everything because he's given you himself, and you already have it. And I saw exactly what he meant. As I see the spark in my brother, as I am willing to have that spark grow into a light, in that process, I discover the fatherhood within me. The fatherhood of extending the truth or the light or the joy or the peace. What we are willing to be is what we give. What we are willing to be is automatically shared with the entire sonship. And he's trying to get us to learn to think as a whole. It's just the way you remain in the kingdom is to teach the kingdom to the kingdom. I'm thinking, well, what does that mean? Well, then you have an awareness like this of, well, God is already in us. He's already given us everything. And the way in which the fatherhood becomes, oh yes, I'm not separate from the Father. The Father and I are not separate. We're not different. The Father lives in me and has given me everything. And I have fatherhood by extending that and by seeing that light and that spark and in my brother, and realizing that, there really is only one thing happening here. There isn't anything outside of this. To be in the kingdom is to teach the kingdom to the kingdom, to keep our focus on the kingdom, and to realize that that's the way, that is the way, not out of here, that is the way to our real self. That is the way to what we truly are as an experience, as a understanding. He speaks a lot in this section on the gifts of the fatherhood. Oh, on my part, in the invitation, the invitation to healing. So, this is the invitation to healing. That's exactly what he's talking about here. I get it now. You get it too, don't you? I know Alexa gets it. All of a sudden something like that, it just sparks, and it just shakes us awake for a moment, where we really see that, it's all of a one piece, and it's a one glorious, eternal piece. There's no outside of it. There's no beyond it. There's no before it. It's always been and it always will be, and it's eternal. It's eternal. And so we're moving into the realm of the eternal, from time to eternity. And he opened this chapter on God or the ego, talking about the eternal and eternity. And so, he's making it, he will make this real for us if we ask the Holy Spirit, our teacher, to help us. He's our guide and he's our comforter. And Jesus is saying, I'm going with you. I am with you. Wow. Thank you. Thank you.
Some of the images I got, the fatherhood. I mean, the hood is a street term for where you grew up. Usually it's a rough neighborhood, but in God's case, it was heaven. in our case, we grew up in heaven. the hood, our hood is heaven. Fatherhood, the Father's hood. So we're trying to get back to that. We're trying to get back to our real hood in heaven. And some images in that Jesus will hold the lamp up. If you've seen any of the Lord of the Rings movie where Gandalf is leading the little hobbits down into any kind of horrible cave-like dramatic situation, Gandalf's always using the lamp. He's leading them, and he's going to walk them through all that. And he winds up getting them out of it too in more ways than one. But I mean, Jesus is like our Gandalf. He's going to take us through this. In Star Wars, when Luke in the second movie goes down into the cave, and he runs into Darth Vader in this cave, he tears off Darth Vader's mask, and guess who it is? It's Luke. I mean, we're dealing with this made-up not self that we've got ourselves terrified of. But Jesus is going to walk us into that cave. He's going to show us it's okay. And will you not answer the call of love with joy instead of being scared S-less? I mean, we're afraid to go into the cave. We sort of have a sense that we're going to run into ourselves on some level, but we're not sure we want to do that, because it could be really bad. Internally, we think we're the home of evil, darkness, and sin. We think if we go into that cave, that's what we got to deal with. Well, the good news is that isn't quite true. What we have to deal with is there is no cave, there is no bad self, there is no Darth Vader, there is no me pretending I'm Darth Vader. And Jesus will walk us through all that. He'll guide us through it, and we can do it fearlessly with him if he's by our side, if we let him be by our side going into that cave. So, yeah, getting back to the hood, the real hood. Another thing I wanted to point out in this section, especially because he uses the word a number of times, in paragraph 2, sentence 3, he says, there are no beginnings and no endings in God, whose universe is himself. And when he's using the word universe, most of the time in the course, in fact, I don't think I've ever found a place where he didn't use it this way, but he's not talking about the universe of time and space as we know it. He's not talking about the physical universe of time and space with solar systems and planets. He's talking about heaven. And there would be those among us, including me, who would say, well, why in the hell wasn't that capitalized? He capitalizes heaven all the way through the book. There's no place where he uses the word heaven where it's not capital. Well, in this case, I would argue universe should be capitalized because he's talking about heaven. Throughout this whole section, he uses that word universe, and it's obvious he's not talking about anything we're familiar with. He's talking about the universe of heaven. The Father's hood is heaven. The Father's universe is heaven. So, can you exclude yourself from this universe or from God, who is the universe? oh, can you exclude yourself from the universe or from the God who is the universe? And then he picks up that idea of universe again in paragraph 5. The laws of this universe, the laws of heaven, do not permit contradiction. There's no contradiction in heaven. There's no duality in heaven. There's no place where God the Father ends and God the Son begins. Whatever that is, it's a continuous flow. So there's no contradiction in heaven. In line 10, he goes on, the universe of love, i.e. heaven, does not stop because you don't see heaven, nor have your closed eyes lost the ability to see, meaning our true eyes, our true vision, that we can always have that restored with the help of the Holy Spirit. And we can then, line 11, look upon the glory of his creation. Look upon the glory of this universe of love, and you will learn what God has kept for you. And then in paragraph 7, he's going to revert back to this theme of willingness. Could any part of God be without his love, and could any part of his love be contained? In some ways, this is difficult reading, and I think it goes back to what Bruce Brickman was asking about the other day, like, you know, not being aware of what, throughout this, he talks about our creations, what that looks like. Bruce was saying he wasn't aware of his creations. Well, to read all this stuff, especially in this section, it's talking about the level of heaven, which is an experience. So it's trying to use words to describe something that's indescribable. There are no words in heaven. There is no place where God the Father ends and God the Son begins. So whatever that means, we'll experience when we realize we never left there, that it's still there. It's still our true identity. But until that time, I mean, Jesus spends, you know, some paragraphs trying to describe it, but it's really hard for it to make any sense. I think in the workbook, he actually admits that, that you know, he spends time sometimes trying to describe something that you just can't describe, an experience that's just beyond words in time and space. Line 2, paragraph 7, God is your heritage because his one gift is himself, the gift of the fatherhood, the gift of recognizing who your true father is. In that fatherhood that you recognize, you realize the gift is God himself. His identity is our identity. His will is our will. And that's where he's going to continue to go with that idea that his will is our will. And we're really not fighting against ourselves if we let Jesus walk us through this thing. It's something we really want to do. It's something we really want to experience. No matter how much resistance we seem to throw up, no matter how I seem to forget even what the lesson title is of the day. But however that resistance manifests, we just need to step back and let Jesus lead us again and have that reassurance that we're not doing this alone. And that whatever resistance we might be making up, admit it and then do it anyway. Feel the fear and do it anyway. And then he goes on, line 3, how can you give except like him if you would know his gift to you? So this is like another running theme in the course. If you want to realize you already have God's gift of oneness, of forgiveness, of peace of mind, you have to offer that to your brother. You have to, the way to recognize it is always to give it. And in any given situation, it's giving that awareness to our brother, not necessarily saying it out loud, but being willing to be aware of that in any interaction we have. I was trying to imagine that paragraph 4 when Lynn was reading it, standing on Colfax and Still Street on a soapbox saying that to everybody walking up and down the street. My brother, you are part of God and part of me. When you have last looked at the ego's foundation without shrinking, you will also have looked upon ours. I mean, he doesn't really want us to say this out loud, except to ourselves. I mean, we don't have to say that to our brother, But when we're in an interaction with our brother, am I aware of that? Can I say that in my mind to him? My brother, you are part of God and part of me. Jesus's message to us is our message to our brother. The way we wake up to that's true is by offering that in any given moment to our brother. How can you give except like him if you would know his gift to you? Give then, offer that to your brother without limit and without end to learn how much God has given you. Your ability to accept him depends on your willingness to give as he gives. Your fatherhood and your Father are one. God wills to create, and your will is his. It follows then that you will to create, since your will follows from his. Being an extension of his will, yours must be the same. So, on a good ego day, we're like, yeah, whatever. Sort of sounds good, but I don't know what the hell he's talking about. But when we begin to actually offer that blessing of innocence to our brother, then these words begin to make a whole lot more sense. And we actually feel it, we actually experience it. Paragraph 8, the next page.
Real quick, Tim, it sounds like it's a good spot to mention a workbook lesson I went through recently. It works very well. Workbook lesson 101. God's will for me is perfect happiness. I feel like everyone here can agree that they extend that will, even if it's imperfect. Yes, God's will for me is perfect happiness. Thank you.
Yeah, and the way we wake up to that, I think, is what he's saying here is we offer that possibility. We say that to our brother inside of us, internally. Yeah. Yeah, so it's a nice thing to wake up to. God doesn't make us sick. God doesn't bring gloom and doom upon us. Anything? Paragraph 8. Yet what you will, you do not know yet. You haven't experienced, all of this creation stuff yet. God's creation is your creation, and we are one, and all together, and cuckoo, cuckoo, and all that stuff. But I mean, you haven't quite experienced that yet because you don't know it yet because you haven't really experienced it yet, not to that kind of magnitude. And this is not strange when you realize that to refuse that you are the Son of God is not to know it, not to experience it, not to wake up. And then we go around refusing it and denying it, and we're not even admitting that's what's going on in a good ego normal day. We don't know we're denying our sonship as God's son. And then he goes on, line 4. Line 3, God's will is that you are his son, period. By denying this, you deny your own will, your own identity, and therefore do not know what that experience is of realizing what your own will is. You do not know what it is, but the Holy Spirit remembers it for you. Ask him. If probably there's one mistake most course students make, well, everybody makes it, but course students make it more than anybody else, is we know this stuff, and then we forget to ask for help. We don't have to do it. We don't have to make it happen. We're not the one holding up the lamp. We just got to ask for help. Jesus, please help me, damn it. Holy Spirit, where are you? I need your help. Ask him, therefore, what God's will is for you, and he'll tell you. He'll actually tell you. That's why we don't ask, because we don't want to know. There's a part of us that doesn't want to know. And he will tell you your will. It cannot be too often repeated. And he's not saying this. This is not a metaphor. It cannot be too often repeated that you do not know what your will is. Don't try to figure it out. Ask for help. Ask for help. Ask how to see your brother differently, and in that process, we'll know who we are. It cannot be too often repeated that you just don't know it. Whenever what the Holy Spirit tells you appears to be coercive, it's only because you have not recognized your own will. You haven't recognized who you truly are. That's why we're resistant. That's why it seems like the Holy Spirit is insisting that we do something we really maybe don't want to do. It's because we're insisting that our own will, our own true identity is not what he's going to tell us. I think it must have been on Journey Through the Text, but Ken had a little side story about this issue that Helen, like all of us, have with the Holy Spirit. And Helen, when she was listening to these different voices inside of her, and they weren't always Jesus, the way she knew it was Jesus when he was speaking to her was when he said something that she didn't want to do. Then she knew it was Jesus. It was a good sign that if she didn't want to do it, that it was probably the real Jesus speaking and not some part of her own ego. I thought that was a pretty clever way of, when you wake up in the morning and I don't know if I want to go to this meeting or not. Well, that's a sure sign you probably need to go to that meeting. That's a sure sign that whatever it is you should be doing is exactly that. If you don't feel like doing it, I'm not sure I want to do this. So whenever what the Holy Spirit tells you seems to be coercive, it's only because you don't recognize what's really happening here. And in paragraph 10, you cannot be happy unless you do what you will truly, and you cannot change this because it is immutable. So if we really want to be happy, we have to let this process in. I mean, there's a huge payoff for doing this. And it's the only real payoff. It's the only way we're going to be happy. If you really want to be happy, you got to try this. And you cannot change this because it is immutable. And then line 3, you are afraid to know God's will because you believe that God's will is not your will. I mean, he's constantly repeating this same idea over and over. The reason you're scared, the reason you're resistant, the reason sometimes you don't want to do this course is because you've decided that your will isn't God's will. Your identity is not God's identity. And then he goes on, line 4, this belief is your whole sickness and your whole fear. This belief is hanging on to the tiny mad idea of separation and not letting it go. I am this thing that could separate. I am this thing that is not the will of God. Paragraph 11, you are asked to trust the Holy Spirit only because he speaks for you. He is the voice for God, but never forget that God did not will to be alone. And then finally, that last sentence returns to that idea we were talking about earlier. This whole idea of allowing the Holy Spirit to show us what our true will really is, that is why healing is the beginning of the recognition that your will is his. That's what healing is. In the Course, healing is not about the body. We kind of get that at this point. And in terms of the mind, it's simply the recognition that your will is his. It's the beginning of healing, the beginning of the awareness that our will is God's will. Our identity is God's identity. And then that's the invitation to healing, the invitation to do that, to recognize that our will is God's will. And I'll step back and let Lynn lead the way.
It's so powerful to get what you just said, that God's will is our will. There isn't any other will to get. There isn't any other thing to make happen, or there isn't any effort that could possibly be made to bring that about. This is, a constant learning in what it means not to effort, not to try to do this, but to allow, in a sense, an experience that I don't know about you, but for the most part, when I hear this conversation about wills, until very recently, there was still the idea of bringing one will together with another will and sort of smushing them together. And that's how it would become one will. And, my experience is that it really is all letting go, and it is all learning what it means to accept and to be, instead of to have to get, and by acquiring. And it's just being made really clear here in this chapter, what he's talking about. And then to answer the question that we asked in the very beginning, will you accept this with joy, with joy in your heart and happiness in your heart? And the next thing he presents us with is the invitation to healing. And in this, he is making it very clear that we have help. We have help with us, but we will not experience the benefits of that help, again, what Tim was just sharing, without putting out an invitation. We're the ones that make the invitation to the Holy Spirit to become, or to accept, really, here comes acceptance again, what Jesus calls in the Course the appointed friend. The appointed friend is the Holy Spirit. Appointed, he says, by God. This is the only friend you should have, he said. You've made a friend of the world. You've made a friend of all the idols that we've worshiped. You've made a friend of, nothing but illusions that have kept you bound to the world. And now you have this question that you've been asked, and you have this opportunity to answer, and you have an appointed friend. And I just want to read you a section, just a short paragraph. You don't need to go there. It's in the 500s, and it is actually called the appointed friend. And it's the shortest section in A Course in Miracles. And excuse me a minute, I've lost my, I've lost the location for the appointed friend. Anybody know it off the top of their head? It's in the 500s, I know that. Bear with me, I found it. Paragraph 2, lead not your little life in solitude with one illusion, meaning the ego, as your only friend. This is no friendship worthy of God's Son, nor one with which he should remain content. Yet God has given him a better friend, in whom all power in earth and heaven rests, in whom all power in earth and heaven rests. The one illusion that you think is friend obscures this friend, his grace and majesty from you, and keeps his friendship and forgiveness from your welcoming embrace. Without him, you are friendless. Seek not another friend to take his place. There is no other friend. What God appointed has no substitute, for what illusion can replace the truth? So he's essentially saying that we're living our life in solitude with one illusion as our friend. And as I read that, the understanding came that we're not talking about the Holy Spirit being something that we are not. The Holy Spirit is our right mind. The Holy Spirit is the mind that remembers God. And in this invitation to healing, he actually invites us to care for and protect this friend. To actually, I mean, if it's a friend, it's a friend. If my right mind is my comforter and my friend, my guide to take me home, my teacher, and on and on. I think there's maybe 20 words for the Holy Spirit in the Course. And they're all very generous and loving and comforting and beautiful ideas about this mind that is actually the beautiful mind of that we are. So I think that's an interesting way to look at it, in the sense of we're letting go of the ego is not a friend. It doesn't know anything, can't teach us anything, can't help us, only leads us, to nowhere and nothing, to begin, if we haven't already. And of course, we have already established a relationship with the Holy Spirit. But, we may want to become more and more comfortable with that as being really what we are, and learning to rest in that. So I'm on page 197, and the first paragraph: if sickness is separation, another way to think of that now is that there are two separate wills. If sickness is separation from God's will, which is your will, the decision to heal and to be healed is the first step toward recognizing what you truly want. What you truly want. Will you not answer the call of love with joy? What you truly want. Every attack is a step away from this, and every healing thought brings it closer. So we know we spent quite a bit of time on the idea of attack and the belief that attack gets us something and that we can actually do it. We can only do it in the ego's dream world. We can only do it in an illusory nightmare. It's the belief in attack is the problem, that it is something that we can do or that can happen to us. We can attack or be attacked. And Jesus tells us that to be truly helpful, we really need to learn that we're harmless. We're all harmless, not as bodies, but the idea that lives in our mind that he's teaching us to is don't go around expecting enemies. If we're expecting enemies, guess what? We're going to get enemies because we find enemies. The ego finds enemies to rejoice. Everybody wants to be happy, but we can have very different ideas about what makes us happy. What makes the ego happy is to find enemies. So that's what we have to look at and realize that we need a teacher, the Holy Spirit, and to teach us and to show us that there are no enemies in the right mind. What it's like to be in the right mind.
This morning I'm sleeping soundly in bed, and it's a little bit before 7, and I have my door open and a nice spring breeze is coming in, and I'm deep asleep. and then we have a gentleman next door with a Harley. he cranks it up. I sit up bolt upright in bed. I'm gonna blow up his goddamn bike. I wasn't even out of bed yet. I was gonna kill somebody.
But he's not here's the difference. He's not an enemy, and you're not going around suffering because of him. Because oh yeah? Well, you're laughing right now, and you're using it to tell a story that I think is pretty funny. I heard the same explosion. It was really funny. It was very, very loud. All right, let's go down a little further. Here it is again, the idea, sentence 3. The Son of God has, what a strange way of saying it. He has both Father and Son because he is both Father and Son. To unite having and being is to unite your will with his, the Father and the Son. For he wills you himself. Back to that idea again, he's given himself to you and you already have it and you are it. And the only way you know that is by your kindness and your generosity and your willingness to see the spark in everyone and your willingness to give up the idea that there is, you can be affected by something outside yourself. And on and on and on. This is how we practice all day long. So we stay in the kingdom. And obviously, we forget. but we have the Holy Spirit. We really want to make good friends with our right mind and the one that remembers God. And you will yourself to know him. You will yourself. Wow. And you will yourself to him, to the Father. Because in your perfect understanding of him, you know there is but one will. That's that experience we were talking about earlier, where you have that experience and it goes click and it's like, oh my God, there is only one will. Yet when you attack any part of God and his kingdom, your understanding isn't perfect. And what you really want is therefore lost to you. Healing thus becomes a lesson in understanding the true foundation for the thought system, the principles of giving is receiving, the principles of the true identity that we are. The more you practice, the better teacher and the better learner you become. If you've denied the truth, what better witnesses to its reality could you have than those who have been healed by it? Healed by this healing that is being offered. And you see it coming back at you. What better way to learn what we are? But be sure to count yourself among them. For in your willingness to join them is your healing accomplished. You have to jump into the pot too.
Well, I was thinking about how often I whine about, oh, Muji's already there. He's walking around in non-duality. Ken, this seemed like it was easy for Ken. He just was always up and, smiling and not attacking. Jesus, same way. All these guys have it. I don't. Why don't I have it? Oh, poor me. I got to jump in the pot with them. I got to realize I'm already in the pot with them.
Yeah. Otherwise there's still separation going on, isn't there?
Yeah. I think Stephen's got something.
Yes.
Yeah, just about that. I have a friend who was from Czechoslovakia, and he participated for years, took years to translate the course into Czechoslovakian. And they finally did it fairly recently. And he said to me one time that he was around Wapnick a lot because Wapnick was helping with the translation. And he said, I didn't see Wapnick smile for 10 years. And I don't believe, that can't be true, right? But it made me feel better, because it took me a couple of years once I started this thing to really smile when I realized, all my good intentions and all the things, had nothing to do with anything. But anyway, I think I'm kind of wrong about that. I just wanted to say that I think Wapnick had some troubles too, and a lot of times in his CDs, he's always so kind and so humorous and so nice about the way. But you can kind of hear it where he goes, he's got that little bit of a growl every once in a while. Anyway, thank you.
So there, Ken.
Well, joy can look all different ways, can it? Only you can be the judge of whether you're joyful or not. It's like so interesting. It's so deceptive. One of the things that time-wise, one of the things that I learned in working with these sections that we're in, it dawned on me that how the experience that we're having whatever that might be. If it's peace, that's what is being experienced over here. If it's joy, that's what's being experienced over here. And one of the things that Jesus is trying to get us to kind of live into, I think, is that goes out to the entire sonship, because minds are joined. It's also true that if I'm in my wrong mind and I'm angry or upset, that's shared with the entire sonship also. That goes out to everyone. And we all know what that feels like. When you're living close with family or friends and somebody is uptight, you know the minute they walk into the room. You don't even have to see them. You can feel it. And he says, it's in, oh dear, I'm getting off track here, but it's in a later chapter, chapter 22, on the holy relationship. And he talks about the understanding. Oh, I did have a marker in it. He says, this is the function of your holy relationship, which means every relationship is a holy relationship. If the Holy Spirit is our teacher, the Holy Spirit will make every relationship a holy relationship. And he says, for what one thinks, the other will experience with him. What this can mean, or what can this mean, except that your mind and your brothers are one. Look not with fear upon this happy fact. I mean, there would be a tendency to think, oh my, that's a terrible responsibility. And, I don't want to know that, this is my gift to the sonship, is my sourpuss and upset martyrdom, that I don't want to know that, But he says, don't look with fear on this happy fact, and think not that it lays a heavy burden on you. For when you have accepted it with gladness, here he is again, accept these things with gladness, with joy, When you accept this with gladness, you will realize that your relationship is a reflection, oh, here we go again, of the union of the Father and the Son. This is how we learn, This is how we learn. What am I giving? What am I extending? Healing, I'm back on page 197. Healing thus becomes a lesson in understanding. And the more you practice it, the better teacher and learner you become. I'm going to go down to sentence 5 in paragraph 2. Every healing thought that you accept, either from your brother or in your own mind, teaches you that you are God's son. In every hurtful thought you hold, wherever you perceive it, doesn't have to be in you, it could be in somebody else, doesn't matter. We're feeding the mind what we want to believe is true. That's what we're doing. We're feeding it one thing or the other because we're seeing it because we want to see it. We decide what we want to see here. In every hurtful thought you hold, wherever you perceive it, lies the denial of God's fatherhood and of your sonship. Wow. down at paragraph 4. Healing is the sign that you want to make whole. And this willingness opens your ears to the voice of the Holy Spirit, our right mind. I'm here only to be truly helpful. I'm here to represent the one who sent me. I don't have to worry about what to say or do. There is no strain and no effort at all in this. All that's needed is the desire to heal, the little willingness to heal. Who's being healed? You are. I am. We're offering healing to the entire sonship by accepting it, by receiving it, by giving it right here with your right mind. This opens your ears to the voice of the Holy Spirit, whose message is wholeness. It's all one thing. It's all the kingdom. It is the kingdom. And I'll close with this, and we'll take a few minutes to consider. Oh, my child, if you knew what God wills for you, your joy would be complete. And what he wills has happened, for it was always true. When the light comes and you have said, God's will is mine, you will see such beauty that you will know it is not of you. Out of your joy, you will create beauty in his name, for your joy could no more be contained than his. The bleak little world will vanish into nothingness, and your heart will be so filled with joy that it will leap into heaven and into the presence of God. I cannot tell you what this will be like, for your heart is not ready. Yet I can tell you and remind you often that what God wills for himself, he wills for you. And what he wills for you is yours. We'll take a few minutes of quiet. Peace to us all. I really, really, really encourage us to become learners, to be learning from everything, all opportunities. Let the Holy Spirit really become our friend and teacher, and just watch the miracles. The miracles are the effects of learning from the Holy Spirit. that's the clue. That's the tip off that we're on the right track, and we're starting to see differently. And we have all the help with this beautiful, beautiful message. Oh, my child, if you only knew. All right. Everybody in? I'm in.
In the pot. We're in the pot.
Yeah,
We're in the pot.
we jumped into the pot right here.
I wanted to check with Peggy Lee. Was Jesus boring today, Peggy Lee, or was he okay? She's smiling.
No, not at all. It was good.
Oh, okay, good. I hate it when he's boring.
Why?
I've even thought Jesus was boring at times, but I don't anymore. It's because I wanted to run away. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.